All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you guys are all doing well on this Friday afternoon. Welcome to the next in our series of Quality Assurance Group webinars. Today, we're going to be focusing on implementation strategies for data-driven outcomes. So I'm really glad you guys were able to join us today. My name, for those of you that don't know me, let me get my screen and everything up here. Technical issues. All right, so my name is Jason Laws, and I am the liaison to our development team in terms of working on our Therap's business intelligence platform. I am also joined on the call today by a couple of our DDO specialists, Shay Dotson and Fayone Johnson. My guess is many of you guys know Shay and Fayone, who've been with us for a very long time as support specialists, getting folks up and running with Therap. And now over the last year or so have been working directly with a lot of our providers on getting up and running with the DDO module as well as the associated dashboard within the business intelligence platform. So again, we appreciate you guys being with us. Today's webinar is going to be focused on domain identification and measurement within the DDO module. I think many of you guys may have joined us on last week's call where we gave kind of a broad overview of exactly what DDO is and what it does. And so for today's purposes, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into DDO and start talking about some specific strategies for identification of domains and how to measure those within the module. And again, this is part of kind of an ongoing series of different DDO-related webinars that we're doing. So I did want to make you guys aware of a couple of others that are coming up over the next few weeks. Specifically on September 6th, we're going to be doing one around creating outcome measure types to measure your organizational progress. And then on September the 18th, we're going to be doing DDO done right, which is tips for a successful DDO implementation, where Fayone's going to really take us through her process of working with organizations to get up and running. And you guys can also see the link here off of our biz site where you can go register for those as well. So we certainly hope that you'll join us. But again, for today's purposes, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the background on DDO. We talked a lot about that last week, and I think most of you guys are familiar with it. But at the same time, I recognize there's a possibility that we have a few folks on the call that for whom DDO is a brand new thing. So I at least want to take just a couple of minutes giving some background info on exactly what it is. And so the short version is that data-driven outcomes is a module as well as an associated dashboard that allows organizations really to identify broad outcome domains that they want to assess for the organization, and then use the individualized data that you guys are collecting through ISP data to assess these broad organizational domains. And so the idea here is based on the recognition that ISP data is as unique as all of the individuals that you support. Everybody that you serve has a unique set of goals, plans, outcomes, all of those kinds of things that we're tracking through our ISP data module, like the standard template that you see on the screen here. The issue, or excuse me, I should say, for a long time, folks have been using that module and the associated reports that I have on the screen now to assess individualized progress towards desired goals and outcomes. And there's a tremendous amount of value there, and we certainly don't want to reduce the frequency with which folks are using these. We think they're great at individual assessment. But the trick with ISP data is that when you're trying to assess ISP data across an entire population of people that you serve with a unique set of unique sets of goals and outcomes and all of that, the ability to aggregate it at an organizational level to really assess how the organization's performing towards our broad goals and domains gets a little murky. We're trying to grade ourselves across, in many cases, several hundred and sometimes 1,000 sets of outcomes, rather than trying to be able to boil things down into a core set of indicators that we can use to address organizational performance. And so that's really what DDO was designed to focus on. And I just saw a question coming through from Lisa. No, this will not be a repeat of the DDO webinar from last week. It's just a quick introduction, and then we're going to get into some more detailed strategies in just a moment. But again, so the basic idea is that DDO allows an agency to map over specific tasks to broader domains that the organization wants to assess to map over the scoring method that is associated with the individualized tracking so that you can look at that through at the domain level as well. And the end result is that once you pass the individualized ISP programs through this general mapping process, you end up with a situation where you have all of your individualized programs and the specific individuals with whom they're associated mapped over to a common outcome measure type that you can then use to assess how the organization is performing broadly. And once you've kind of mapped over your data into that broad data set, you can then use the DDO dashboard to see how the organization is progressing towards those particular outcomes. And so once the data is in that dashboard, you're able to see how the agency is performing, as you can see here, across broad domains, either in the aggregate or in a more longitudinal view across different months. You're able to make sure that the data is trending in the general direction that you want and kind of see where things are going there. You're also able to drill down to the subdomain levels, to the individual staff members that you have, and see what kind of success they're having with facilitating particular outcomes for individuals. So really, you're able to take a very broad view of very individualized data to see how the organization is performing, with the intent of being able to operationalize that data and take certain steps to improve upon your services and ultimately upon the outcomes achieved by the individuals that you support. So again, that's just some really broad background information about this. I think most of you guys are familiar with DDO, but I wanted to make sure folks at least had a general understanding of the mechanics of it. What we're going to do now is I'm going to shift over the presentation to one of our specialists, Shay Dotson, who is going to start talking a little bit about how organizations can identify those domains. You know, one of the hardest things to do sometimes is, okay, we've got this tool. We want to be able to see how we're doing at the agency level. Where do we start? How do we identify what it is that we want to measure? And so I'm going to hand it off to Shay, and she's going to start taking you guys through that process and some of the considerations that you can make. Shay, you there?
I'm here. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm trying to click on show my screen, Jason.
I'm working on it. Hang on. Okay. And there you go. You are now the presenter.
All right. Hi, everybody. I hope you can see my screen okay. So I wanted to just take an opportunity during our time together today to just talk about where do you start sort of developing your thoughts on where you can find categories or domains. So oftentimes in working with agencies, the hardest thing is to start thinking about what are those categories or buckets of information that we want to track and see trends on. What are we wanting to map our data next to? And so there's various ways that we start that conversation. It could very well start very simply with, we just want to overall see goal progress. We want to be able to determine whether or not the supports that we're giving in our service delivery model are helping us to be successful or helping individuals to be successful towards their own goals. So you might be looking at goal progress, or you may want to look at drills and how you're supporting individuals with their response to drills. Some organizations actually use a ISP program to track drills within the system. Sometimes those standards might come, or those domains might come from your company's vision or mission statement. Okay, there may be certain things that your company said that are, you know, the vision and the mission is to be the premier organization who supports people with community inclusion, choice, and individual rights. And so maybe those three categories are something that you guys take and you say, all right, we want to live by what we say. So now we want to create an outcome measure type to see if the data that we're working on, or the goals that we're working on with people, if there's data that supports the fact that we are a company that focuses on community inclusion, we focus on choice, we focus on individual rights. Those domains might also come from organizational strategies, right? So your board may have determined that there are certain goals that it wants the organization to work towards. And so those particular categories that you're looking at for organizational performance, you may very well want to develop an outcome measure type that would help you to track that information. And so I'm going to go over some sort of thoughts of where you can pull it from, and then go into the application and share some examples of how you can pull that information into outcome measure types. So a different section or a different area that you might consider would be, I don't know why my other slide is not showing, I apologize. The other area that you might consider would be if you're doing any sort of state standards or accreditation bodies such as CQL, CARF, or national core indicators are great places to sort of take those standards and think about the categories that they have available and how you would then put them into an outcome measure type to map across your organization. So, for example, let's start with sort of those internal standards, if you will. If we were looking at just a list here, and through your application, you'll be able to build sort of your own library of outcome measure types that you can use for different ISP programs or data that you're collecting within the system. So let's say that I wanted to look at goal progress, and there's one that is already defaulted within your account. It's a very simple one, just says goal progress. And the score labels, or those values that you're going to be putting on the scoring method that staff will see. Your staff will see the scoring method, that will stay the same. And I think we talked about that in our in the last meeting that we had, or last webinar. But the scoring method, the drop-down menu that you put together for your staff, that will remain the same at that individual level, but you'll be able to apply a value to that to say, when this set of scores come in, it's equal to something that's positive, negative, or neutral towards this goal progress, okay? Or maybe you're looking at something like you want to be able to see safety and security across your organization. Are you addressing those particular needs? And so you might come up with domains that are related to safety inside the home, fire, disaster safety at home. Home is appropriate and has adaptive safeguards, sanitary and comfortable living, individuals' dietary and nutritional needs are met. And so maybe the scoring label is working with the organization and they wanted to be able to judge whether the support has been exceptional, it meets standards, it needs minor improvement, or they made minor improvement, needs improvement, or needs significant improvement. And so they wanted to map that across their whole organization to see how that was going. Let's see here. I have a bunch of ones. So you can see there's a whole sort of library that we have created within this particular application. One I think is really a cool one. I'll show you this, and then I'm going to go shift to our examples and then come back to the application to show you one that we're working on a big project on, and it's getting really good responses in terms of person-centered practices. So social roles and relationships on the individual level, you may be looking at that, and we just want to be able to see, are people connecting with relationships, and what sort of roles are they taking on? So are they friends, family, romantic partners, mentors? And we want to be able to see, is the role present? Is it present with paid support? Is it present without support? Or is the role not present? And that's particularly important, first of all, just on the level of connecting people within their circles of support in the community. But it is also one of those things in the CMS final rule that they're looking in person-centered planning and person-centered practices to see what sort of relationships is this individual developing. Are they able to say that they are active in their community to the same degree that people without supports, or people without a disability, I should say, are? And are those relationships mostly paid or unpaid? So this is a great way to be able to track that information within the system. okay? There's also a whole host of national sort of domains that you may be looking at. But before we get into those, I'll show you sort of an example spreadsheet of things that you can track internally. So I've covered a couple of things on here, but maybe you're interested in behavioral intervention outcomes, right? And this was a great one that Fayon put together to just look at what sort of interventions are we doing with aggression, self-interest behavior, and psychiatric. And so if you are an organization who's tracking your behavioral data through ISP programs, this is one of the things that you may be interested in seeing. And our staff, you know, based on how you train them, are they more so using the interventions that are encouraged, discouraged, or neutral, right? Or drills, if you're tracking that and you wanted to see how are we helping individuals to learn how to respond to fire safety or tornadoes or emergency, and that is set up as positive, negative, or neutral. So as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that you can certainly track information. Maybe you're just looking for a general set of outcome measures, and that might include community inclusion, employment, skill development, relationships, choice. So whatever those particular labels are or categories, and I sort of call them information buckets of information that we want to see, you would put those together as your domains. And then over here, you would decide how those score labels will come together. And so if you are not necessarily, if you're not into DDO yet, or you haven't started creating that, I want to show you what that process will sort of look like. So you'd be able to create a new outcome measure type. And at this point here, this is where you would sort of come up with an acronym, if you will, of what that's going to stand for. And this would be the place where you give a more detailed line about what exactly this particular outcome measure type is. So let's say that I was looking to do something with national core indicators, right? I like the different things that they offer. I could simply go to their website, and they have different tabs. Okay, this is their individual indicators. Here's the list of all the different frames that they have. And I could maybe decide that, all right, they've got domains already established, and maybe I just want to do these general domains. Or there may be one that is of particular interest to me, and if I wanted to drill down a little bit more, I could get into that, look at it, and say, maybe I want to take this as the overall national core indicator of self-determination. I want to be able to see that, and maybe I want to make a summary of what these particular things are looking for, and I would add them in as my domains within this particular outcome measure type, right? And so I would choose the number that's going to match up with what's on national core indicators. Or maybe I'm interested in family indicators, and I see, you know, this information in planning or choice and control or all these different things. Depending on what I'm tracking in my data, I may decide to take these and make these my subdomains. So let's do one quickly. Let's do work. Okay. So if I were creating one based off of work, I would then, if I'm trying to choose one that's easier for me to copy. Okay. So if I were over here, I could come in and put in, I just may put in SAT, and I would say National for Indicators Satisfaction. I'm creatively spelling over here today. This section comes in really handy, and I'll show you an example in just a second of how this helps, you know, to sort of really define and helps those people who are going to come in and map the information later to understand what's the data that you're looking for. So there's that comments and instructions where you can really get in there and make it really clear for those people who are going to come behind you. And so if I'm working with this National Core Indicators one, and I might put NCI out here. And I would go in and sort of look at how many of these do I need. So, all right, 6. Click Add Task Domain. And just based on how I'm summarizing those things, literally, you could either decide to copy it, or you could summarize it, you know, satisfied with their job, satisfied with day program, or you might decide to copy these particular things here, right? So whatever that particular domain you want to be. Okay. And maybe it's satisfied with where they live, right? So all those particular things, you would put that information in there. And, you know, as you're working on it, you could decide the score label or the value that I'm going to put on it. I like the sort of default one, positive, negative, or neutral, or you may decide that you want to change it. And you have up to 10 options that you can add in for those particular score labels. So maybe I want to put this as out or indicator present, partially present, not present. Okay. So you have the option of changing those. You also have the ability to put up to 25, outcome measure type domains here, okay? So if you're an organization that's interested, and I'm just gonna put save on this one. If you're an organization that's interested in doing the CQL, and I'll show you the palms that we did in here, you could actually do all 21 of those palms. So you're able to see all of those in there. And we just put outcome present, partially present, not present. So there are a variety of places that you certainly can grab examples or places to start with those particular outcome measure types. I'm going to stop showing my screen for just a moment so I can switch over. And show you a really great example of one that is capturing a lot of details in that comments and instructions section. Okay, so we created one for a Living Well project where the team wanted to be able to capture how agencies are working towards person-centered practices, how they are being able to track things that are related to people connecting to what's important to them and important for them in their life. And so in that particular outcome measure type, because we wanted the ability to track that data both ways, meaning we wanted to focus on information that would be specifically related to what's important to a person and what's important for them. We broke it out into 2 different outcome measure types so that when we were mapping on the other end, and Fayon is going to go through that process of showing you that, when we were mapping on the other end, we had the ability to map the same data that's coming from one ISP program twice, because there's quite possibly goals that individuals work on that fit into both categories. And so we wanted that ability to map them towards both. So for example, with important to, the team came in and really took an opportunity to define those domain areas so that anybody seeing this, when they're getting ready to map it, they could refer back to the definitions. So choice was related to the person receiving supports and those particular things reflecting a goal that they desired and their own preferences and aspirations. The goal reflects increasing connection to the community through social inclusion and relationship building for social connectedness and relationships. Meaningful activities, defining out what that means, that it's something important to or consequential, meaning they need that skill set in order for the individual to grow. And it could be psychological, social, physical, personal. Safety, health, and well-being, person-centered practices. And one of the things that I talk to agencies about is the importance of defining these domains, because of the fact that if you have individuals or staff members who are going to be a part of this process, and maybe they didn't get to sit in on the initial conversation that you were having about the domains and why you wanted to choose those, that person coming behind you may not very well know what data should be connected to this. And so by having this instruction and comments here, it gives them something to reflect back on or refer back to when they're looking through that data that they need to map over. And they also did the same thing with helping people to understand, what do we mean when we're saying the value is achieved important to, or achieved important for, or in progress, or not important to, or not important for that very same reason. Because here they have the domains, but when they come in to apply the score labels, they're going to see these and have to match them up with the correct scoring method response to say that it relates to this particular value, which then creates that common language in DDL that you can thereby sort of see the performance across your organization up a level from that individual response. Okay. Any questions coming in right now?
Hey guys, I intended to point this out at the very beginning and it completely slipped my mind, so my apologies. Obviously, given the sheer numbers of folks on the call, we've got everybody in listen only mode, just keep down the ambient noise. But you all do have the question panel on your GoToMeeting operation panel over there, and you can use that to submit a question. And if it's just a direct question to one of us, we can answer it in text, or if it's something that you'd like discussed to the group, we've certainly got our eyes on it, so feel free to submit anything there. But right now, Shay, we don't have any coming in at the moment.
Okay. So I'm going to refer back to this, and then I'm going to pass it over to Fayon. I think there's some great examples on here about employment and meaningful day activities, paid employment, volunteer, desired social activity, and completed independently, completed with supports, not completed. So we give various examples, and when we're working with organizations, we're always happy to share this document just to sort of give you a jump off point, a bridge to jump from. In looking at these particular ones, the CQL part could be broken down just into the 5 factors rather than all of the 21 columns. Or if you're an organization that is helping people to develop their sort of life by using Charting the Life course, the life domains, you could take those 6 life domains broadly and be able to put those into an outcome measure type, or just various things, that you might take from, if anybody is familiar with Delmarva and their sort of quality assurance and certain categories that they may come out and look for, you could take those things that are on their person-centered review and make them into an outcome measure type. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to share those examples to sort of get your mind stirring on how those particular things could be created within your organization. Okay, at this point, I am going to hand it off to you.
All right, awesome. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, so once you guys have gotten past the point where you've established what it is that you'd like to look, or rather I call it the lens that you'd like to view your ISP program data through, we get to the fun part where you actually go into the system, your outcome measure type has been created and it's been approved, but we now need to take that language or that standardization that you've created and tie it back to all of the disparate pieces of ISP data that you have. So we're going to walk through what that process looks like and then move into, once all of that is done, how the information is then presented in business intelligence, and you can start looking at it and evaluating it in your dashboards. So once all of that is done, the folks that you've identified as what we call your DDO administrators are going to have access to the module via the admin tab. And where it says data-driven outcomes, they're going to have the ability to start mapping. In the module, you have two ways that you can do mapping. You can map each of your ISP programs over, or if you're one of the agencies that uses ISP program templates as sort of a launch pad, you have the ability when you create that initial template to map it over to your outcome measure type so that when you link it to your ISP programs, the mapping moves over on the background, similar to when you're working with the template. And you do have the ability, if you are using that template option, to deviate slightly from how you previously mapped it, and we'll get a chance to take a look at all of that in just a little bit. So if I'm mapping an ISP program, a specific ISP program, then I'm going to come into this section, I'm going to click on mappings, and then I'm going to be able to locate it. So when you do it this way, it pulls all of the individuals up. And then once you click on the individual, all of the eligible programs are going to show up here. Now, one of the things that you're going to do on the front end when you're getting ready to use DDO beyond just establishing what outcome measure types you're going to want to use is Shay or myself, whomever's working with you, is going to help you evaluate the current structure of your ISP programs and make sure that they're designed in such a way that you're getting meaningful information out on the back end. Even if your existing structure doesn't need a ton of changes, one of the things that you are going to have to do is make them DDO eligible by toggling a new option that's going to appear. And actually, I'll go back and show you. But by toggling a new option that's going to appear when you're creating the ISP program that allows you to enable DDO. So if I were to come in here and select an individual, once you've gotten past the point where you've filled it out, there's going to be this new option that says participate in data-driven outcomes, and you're going to need to make sure that you're selecting yes here. Any ISP program that has DDO enabled becomes eligible for mapping. So if you create an ISP program and this no is toggled, when you go in and try to do mapping, it's not going to show up as an option to choose from. So I'm going to hop back over into my admin tab and into that data-driven outcome section. And now when I click on mappings and I go ahead and I select my friend Royce here, anything from all of his services that is eligible for mapping is going to show up. Now, I went ahead and I recreated an ISP program for behavior tracking that I'd previously done, just so I can walk through what that mapping process looks like. So when I open this up here, and I've selected the ISP program, and I always have the ability by clicking on the name of the program to view the actual details, just in case someone has ISP programs that are named quite similarly. But the idea is to take the ISP program that I've selected and link it to the outcome measure type that I'd previously created on the front end. So if I'm looking to evaluate this behavior ISP program using my national core indicators, then I'd select that one. If I'm looking to evaluate it using my CQL or POMs, then I do that. If I'm looking to evaluate it using some of the behavior outcomes that I want to look at, then I can do that. And you can map a single ISP program to as many outcome measures as you have approved. So you can take that same piece of information and you can view it through multiple lenses. What does it look like when we view it this way? What does it look like when we view it that way? So I'm going to come in here And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to map it to a particular outcome measure type that Shay had shown you in the example that we're just calling behavior for the time being. When you do that, the system pulls up the information. If you had included comments or instructions, as Shay went through in great detail, excuse me, just a few moments ago, those instructions or tips, tricks, recommendations that you've created for your staff or your DDO admins to help them make sure that they're mapping these consistently are going to show up. Otherwise, what you're going to see is a description of the task. So anything that you entered into the task box when you created the ISP program, that unique step or outcome or target that we have for Royce in this case, or the individual that you selected, is going to show up in this description box. And to the right of it, the task domains, so those larger buckets, as Shay and I like to call them, will appear. And the idea is to take that particular task, that unique step, that unique outcome for the individual, and then indicate what area or what lens do we want to look at this in. So in this case, since we're dealing with behaviors and the behavior in question is agitation, what does that fall under? Does it fall under the lens of aggression? Does it fall under the lens of self-interest behaviors? Does it fall under the lens of a psychiatric episode? And you can pick and choose as many as you need that correlate to that particular task and that particular individual. Down here, I can come down and the issue that we're looking at, or the specific task, is anxiety. Where do I want to tag that? And you'll continue to go through and do this for however many tasks or subject areas there are available for that individual. If you have a particularly lengthy ISV program, or even a particularly lengthy outcome measure type, you're not required to make a selection for every single one of these. So one of the questions that comes up a lot is, if you're doing a combined ISV program where you're tracking several different items on a single form, and you're looking to map it to an outcome measure that doesn't particularly address one of the tasks that you have there, it's okay to not map it. One of the terms that I like to use is, if it doesn't apply, let it fly, and you move on to the next one and map accordingly. So I can come through and I can make a couple more suggestions. But since this happens to be one of the longer ISV programs, I'm just going to skip down to where we get to actually mapping the scoring methods and the choices that we created in the outcome measure type there. When you come down to scoring methods, it's going to display the options that you created. So if you guys are using a plus or minus, if you're using some of the standard ones that exist in the application, such as the level of independence, or whether it's completed or incomplete, that's what's going to be listed here. And the idea is to say, when this particular individual, or rather when staff go in and select this particular score from my scoring method list, what does it represent for this particular individual? So if Royce has an episode of aggression and staff respond, or the intervention is redirection, what do we consider that? Is that an encouraged behavior? Is that a discouraged behavior? Is that neutral? So we can choose based on the labels that we created when we designed our outcome measure type, and we can pair it up. So for one individual, planned ignoring might be an encouraged behavior, whereas for a different individual, we want staff to stay away from that unless it's an absolute resort. So you still are able to maintain that person-centeredness. You're still able to maintain that uniqueness and that specificity for the individual, but because you're tying this into a larger whole, you're able to look at it at large, and you're able to aggregate that. So it looks like we have a couple of questions that have come up. Let's see, before we move on. So do we find that agencies need to get used to using Therap for a while before diving into this module? I think I need a little bit more clarification on that. But if I'm understanding your question correctly, should they be used to using ISP programs and doing data collection before moving into data-driven outcomes? Absolutely. I think that you guys will definitely want to make sure that you found a structure that works well, that is comprehensive and is able to capture the information that you need, and that your staff understand what the requirements are and how documentation needs to be done before you move into starting to use data-driven outcomes. And if you guys have additional questions, by all means, keep them coming. But again, the idea is you want to come in here and you'll want to indicate for this particular individual, based on the choices that you have, what you wish to include. You will have to select an option for each of the scoring method choices that you have, with the exception of any score that's marked non-reportable. So non-reportable scores, if you decide that you want to leave those blank, you want those ignored in your totals when you're looking at that in business intelligence, you can do so and go ahead and approve that. You'll want to make sure you give it a once over before you do approve, because again, once you've done that, it's final, it becomes a static document, and this particular pairing becomes view only. In the event that after you approved it, you realize that there was an issue with your outcome measure type or something that you want to change, you can always go back and discontinue the outcome measure type and then link the ISV program to the new one that you've created. And again, you can do this for the same ISV program a couple of different times. So here's that behavior tracking one. If I wanted to be able to go in and map that again to POMS or NCI or anything like that, I can. And you'd continue to repeat this process until all of your ISV programs were mapped to all of the corresponding outcome measure types that you decided that you wanted to use across your organization. Once the mapping has occurred and the system is aware of how to analyze that information, you're able to go into the business intelligence dashboards and start to look at it. Right now, information in business intelligence is updated weekly. So every Sunday night, the database is refreshed, and any data collection that's occurred for mapped ISV programs becomes eligible for you to analyze in the dashboards. So when you come into work on Monday mornings, the information is up to date and is current, and progressively throughout the week, as you add more changes, those aren't reflected until the following Sunday. Okay, any questions about that? All right. So now that our setup, for all intents and purposes, it's done, it's now time to get into the dashboard and start to look at how some of this works and some of the different ways that you can view that. So there are some additional privileges associated with, sorry, wrong tab. There are some additional privileges associated with business intelligence. So you can have a group of folks that are part of your DDO team and are able to set up outcome measure types and complete that linking process. And then you can have a separate group of folks or just some other folks that you want to be able to get into the system and get into the dashboards without necessarily participating in the setup. So there's a business intelligence admin role that can be assigned to them. And for the folks that have it, on their agency reports tab, that business intelligence link is going to be present, and they're going to have the ability to choose from the dashboards that you've purchased to come in and start looking at information. So if I go ahead and I hop in here, I'll have the option to choose which dashboards I want to come in and take a look at. And obviously today we're focusing on the data-driven outcomes. And it looks like I've already got that open here in another tab. So this is what the data-driven outcome dashboard looks like. And you're able to come in, let me actually go back out without any filters so you can see what that looks like. Thinking. All right, let's do it that way. We'll refresh, hop back in. Okay. So this is what the dashboard looks like when you initially sign in, and you'll see that you have the ability to filter either by programs, individuals, a particular framework domain. You're able to look at this this information and drill down by employees, so actual users who are doing this data collection, and then you're able to assign different weights and different values to your ISV programs. So When you sign in, the system automatically starts going through the database and looking for information as of the last refresh, and you'll see that the date of the last refresh is always located down here at the bottom of the page. You can manipulate the date ranges, so if I want to go back just a little bit here, I can change my date range and then apply that change, and the system goes in and it starts to do its thing and bring the information up. You can filter by program types. Okay, now program types, if you guys recall, when you do your Therap setup, is where you're able to go out and identify which ones are day programs, which ones are ICF, which ones are residential. And you may find that you need to do a little bit of cleanup when you start using this module so that they're labeled appropriately. But as you can see, if you want to sort of parse out your agency by service type, you can do that using this program filter. Or if you even just want to specify which programs you want to include, you can pick and choose those names. But once I enter the date range that I'm interested in, I'll be able to choose from my list of outcome measure types to indicate which one I want to view, or rather which lens I want to view my information through. And when I do that, it brings up a table and it shows me all of the values based on the data collection that exists in the system. So I can compare this information using a table. I can view this information using a bar chart. I can do pie charts. So you've got a couple of different options as far as how you can present the data and view it. And you have the ability to export that information into a PDF, into an Excel form, so that you can take the images and add them to reports or graphs or things like that that you may need. All of the information that's presented here, you can drill down to, and depending on which tab you're in or sort of how you want to be able to analyze that information, if I wanted, for example, to come in here and see for this particular outcome, or rather for this particular outcome measure type, which is, I believe we're looking at behaviors, and I want to see how my day services specifically is doing, I can drill down on that information just by clicking on it, and it will identify the individuals, and it will identify how much they've contributed independently to each of those scores and that aggregated total. I can pick and choose. So for example, if I'm done looking at the information for behaviors and I want to switch to information related to my fire drills during that point in time, I can use any of these filters on the top and break that information down to see who's included, and if I want to see the performance on an individual level by clicking on that individual's name. Okay, so those are just at a glance some of the different ways that I can look at that information, and I can look at the different domains that I've included in my outcome measure type, and then compare one individual to the other if I've got multiple individuals enrolled in my program. You'll notice that there aren't any back buttons per se when you're in the dashboards. So if you need to return to that home screen, or you find that certain options are missing and you want to go back, along the bottom here, you have some options where you can click and sort of, there's a tree, if you will, that you can retrace your steps and go back out so that you can start over or apply a different set of criteria for the information that you're looking for. So this allows me to look at it, again, based on program types, and even break that down into specific programs. But if I want to look at the information on an individual level, I can always switch over to that tab on the left. Oops, looks like we need to expand our date range. So you'll see when you come in that the system has a default date range. And if you need to go back and change that, when you switch from one tab to another, you certainly can reset it each time. But you do have some options if you were to click on the settings cog up here, where you can set it up so that it automatically defaults to some predetermined ranges or specifications that you have, so that you don't always have to come in here and update that information back and forth. So again, if I come in here in the individual section, I can indicate which outcome measure type I'm wanting to look at, and then it will list all of the individuals that have a data collection during the time frame and for the particular domain that I've indicated. So when I switch to my fire drills and I'm looking at it on an individual level, I can see how much each individual has scored. Okay, I can see how many ISP programs this is coming from, the total number of values that have been indicated, and then you have that information broken out by month. And as always, you have the ability to change how that is viewed. So it looks like we have a couple of questions. Let's see. We've got a hand raised. Donna, looks like you have a question. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Donna. Okay. Are you there?
Yes.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't. I thought I was typing in a question. I wrote, "Where are you putting data on fire drills in order to pull it to the data-driven outcomes?"
In an ISV program. So data-driven outcomes is pulling all of its data from ISV programs. So I want you guys to be able to sort of think out of the box and not just use your ISV programs for goals and you know, outcome measure tracking. Really anything that you want to be able to track and report on, you can create an ISV program for. So you can do fire drills and other types of things in here as well.
Okay.
Did you have any other questions?
No, thanks.
You're welcome. All right.
One thing I'll jump in real quick and mention, there's a question from David. Will there be a DDO course within the training academy, and that may be useful? And we do appreciate that suggestion. I think that's something we would certainly look into. Given the nature of DDO, we tend to take a little more consultative approach on DDO. That's why we've identified Faye and Shay, given their expertise in person-centered planning, so that they can really work as through the process with the organizations to identify outcomes and go through that mapping process. That's not to say that there wouldn't be any value in a TA course on DDO, and we could certainly look into it, but we definitely would want to supplement it with some one-on-one time with our specialists. But that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to move through these other tabs just really quickly so we have some time at the end for wrap up and for some questions. But as you can see, in addition to being able to look at that information on an individual basis, you can also look at the information based on the outcome measure types themselves. So again, if I come in here and let's go back and apply that. If I'm looking at my behaviors, I can see based on the different domains within the particular outcome measure type, how many occurrences there are. And by clicking on the domain name, where is that information coming from? What individuals, what programs is this information that is being aggregated here coming from? And one of the other things that you can do is you can also evaluate this on a user level, so on an employee level. Does Fayonne do a better job of assisting Jane Doe in accomplishing her outcomes than Shay does? You know, does Jason over at Day Program do a better job of accomplishing, of assisting John Doe in accomplishing his goals than, you know, both Fayonne and Shay combined? So those are some of the things that you're able to go in and look at. Go ahead and bring that up. Let's choose a different outcome measure type where we both will have some data. Okay, and you can see, you know, for Royce in particular, all of the employees that have worked with him, so you'll see myself, you'll see Shay, how many times we've collected data and the aggregate of those. Okay, and then you can break it down not just by looking at an employee, rather an individual and all of the employees that have worked with them, but at looking at the employee altogether and seeing how I'm doing in this case across the board with all of my individuals. You know, I don't want to leave, with all of the individuals that I happen to be working with, okay, and all of the different programs and services. And last but not least, we understand that ISP data isn't always collected equally. What I mean by that is certain objectives are run every day, others are once a month or once a week. So you have the ability in this Manage ISP Program Weights to change sort of how that information is valued. So for example, an ISP program that I'm collecting data in once a day, every day, might have a weight of 1, but something that I'm collecting, for example, twice a week, I might assign a value of 2 so that when we match them up, it's not looking like, or one is not disproportionately outweighing the other simply because data is collected more often. So that's what you're able to do with this ISP program weights section. Those are the options that are available in the data-driven outcomes dashboard in a nutshell. As Jason mentioned at the top of the session, we will be going over these in additional webinars in detail, but I hope that that gives you guys sort of an idea from top to bottom after you've created your ISP programs and you've created your outcome measure types and mapped them, the type of information that you're able to get out of business intelligence. Any questions? And with that, Jason, I'm going to hand it back to you.
All right, thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Shay, as well, for walking folks through that. I think that was great information, and hopefully that was helpful for a lot of our attendees to kind of get a sense of how the process works with DDO and some of the strategies for identifying those outcome domains and then kind of carrying that through all the way to the dashboards and being able to evaluate the information that's in there. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and so what I wanted to do was to give some time for some questions. I've also got a screen up. I'm not going to go through all of this, but just as kind of a background while we're taking questions for folks, just for brainstorming purposes, to think about some ways that you may potentially use DDO within your agency and see if that may spur some additional thoughts. And so let me jump up here and take a look at some of the questions that we have on our board. There was a question about setting up a one-on-one training on DDO, which I think is great. You know, this setting is great that we got a lot of people on here and we get a lot of feedback to go over it broadly, but certainly each agency is a bit unique. So having some time to go one-on-one through this module with one of our folks is useful. And so I'll tell you, kind of depending on the circumstance you're in, there might be a couple of approaches. If you're an agency that's been using Therap for a while, but you have not yet used DDO and you're thinking of adding it, my suggestion to you would be to follow up directly with your particular Therap representative, depending on which region you're in. If you're not sure who that person is, you could probably check with your provider administrator, or if not, you can certainly shoot us a message and we'd follow up with you. And either myself or your particular representative will be happy to set up a webinar where we talk with you one-on-one about the module. If you have purchased DDO, and want to use it, but you just hadn't gotten off the ground yet, we definitely want you to let us know that as well. And either Shay or Fayon will follow up with you directly to start putting together a solid implementation plan to get the ball rolling with using DDO within your agency. Let's see, what are the other questions that we have? So we have a question, can you create ISP programs by site and collect individual data through the ISP programs? That's really a question that's more obviously around ISP programs and data than it is DDO, but basically you can create ISP programs at the individual level and then collect the data that way. If you're looking to apply an ISP program to multiple individuals, the easiest way to do that is to create an ISP program template. And if you create a template, it can then be applied to multiple individuals if there is a core set of information that you want to be able to collect across several individuals. Let's see, I think that addresses all the questions that we have so far. Does anybody else have any thoughts or questions, either specifically to anything that you heard from myself, Fayon, or Shay, or just general feedback to on DDO and things that you've seen that you think may be beneficial? One of the things that we're really trying to put a concerted effort towards recently is working with our users to understand how they're using it within their agency. You know, I certainly love for you guys to hear from us, but at the same time, we love to hear from you and to hear some of the creative ways you guys are applying it, or maybe on the other hand, you have a particular set of outcomes that you look at within your agency, but you hadn't figured out exactly how DDO fits in with that. And so we'd love to have that discussion with you as well. So we'd certainly open you up to that feedback. Question came in, what exactly does DDO stand for? You know, sometimes we use these acronyms so much we forget to actually define them. And it stands for Data-Driven Outcomes. And that's the name of the module as well as the associated dashboard within Therap. Next question is, can DDO map incident reports by program? For instance, injuries occurring within program with a particular employee. DDO is designed really more for programmatic tracking of outcomes data. If you're looking to do high-level aggregation of incident reporting, specifically GERs within Therap, our general event reports, we do have a dashboard designated specifically for that type of tracking. So if that's something you're interested in, let us know, and we can spend some time talking with you about the incident report dashboard as well. Any other thoughts, questions? Will the slides from today's webinar be available? Yeah, what I'm going to do is take this slide deck that I've got up and I'll put that on the Basecamp group. I think most everybody that's on this is on the QA group through Basecamp. If you are not, then you can shoot me an email and let me know and we'll get you added to it and I will share those slides in that manner. And my email address for anybody that doesn't know it is simply my name, jason.laws@therapservices.net. You're welcome to contact me directly. All right, folks, well, we are at 2 p.m. And you are very welcome, Brad. We appreciate you joining us. And a big thank you to both of our presenters today, Fayon and Shay. As I mentioned before, these guys are experts in kind of walking folks through the DDO process. So within your organization, if you're looking for some one-on-one support to do it, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we also encourage you all to join us for some of our follow-up webinars on other aspects of DDO that we've got coming up over the next several weeks. And you can visit the webinar page on our biz site to find out when those are going to happen. So thanks again, and we'll let you guys go and hope you all have a great weekend. Take care.